Hey, college football fans, this is Lenny of Lenny Does Rants, and today we're going to talk about why I think we ought to pay the damn college football players. First, we need to understand the good news and the bad news with the current system. We'll start with what should be an obvious part of the good news. And that these Division I and Division II college football programs are essentially a free farm club for the NFL. And friend, believe me, that's really good news for the NFL. Of course, the current system is also good for the fans of these college football teams, as well as the universities that these premier college athletes play for. The universities benefit big time because for them, college football is a major big business. Let's consider the sort of money we're talking about here. Last year, there were at least 25 universities that made more than $100 million from their sports program. And you know what? Most of that money came from the football program. Now, these big dollars came from ticket sales, TV and radio revenue, conference revenue sharing in some conferences, alumni donations, and the sales from all sorts of things related to the football team. Hence the hat. Go Bulldogs! $100 million a year. Yeah, that's really big business. And you can bet those universities are going to do everything in their power to protect that money. So now, other than the fans, the universities, and the NFL, who else benefits from all this money generated under the current system? Well, the college coaching staffs, for instance. Especially the head coaches. Wait, you mean to tell me the coaches don't just do their job for free and for the love of the game like the players? Don't be an idiot. Of course not. The coaches, like everyone else in this big money machine, do it for the money. They may love the game, in fact they probably do, but there's nothing altruistic going on here. In fact, some of these coaches will go on to the pros and make even bigger bucks. And who could blame them, right? I mean, we all agree, college football, at least Div 1 and Div 2, is a major big business for everyone involved, except maybe the players. Before we leave the area of coaches and the coaching staffs, maybe it would be fun to look at the compensation packages. Now, that's really probably too big a subject, so let's only consider the base salaries before bonuses of the top 25 highest paid coaches, head coaches in these Div 1 and Div 2 schools. Well, it turns out that the highest head coach salary, which by the way, by the time you hear this, probably is higher, in this group of top 25 head coaches is about $8.5 million. And that's before bonuses. And the lowest head coach salary in this same group of top 25 is around $3.5 million. So, it should come as no surprise that with that kind of scratch involved, these coaches have a big reason to hope that their programs should succeed. And one way the programs can succeed is by keeping those star athletes, those scholarship players, at home under their direction, down on their farm, and not off at some other school or off in the NFL. Now, coaches, unlike the athletes that play for free for them, can change jobs whenever they want, as long as their contracts are fulfilled. Usually this means a buyout by another program. Now, if you were expecting some sort of loyalty from these coaches towards their players or the universities that pay them, well, you're going to be disappointed. Because remember, like we said before, college football is a big business, and the coaches, like everyone else, are in it for the bucks. Now, the scholarship college football players, the athletes on the other hand, they don't have it quite so good if they want to change programs. If the unpaid football player wants for some reason to transfer to another school, another program, they may lose a year of eligibility. NCAA rules are set up to benefit the coaches, the university, the NFL, but not necessarily the players. Just doesn't seem right, does it? Now, we can go on and on talking about the good news for the many different participants in the college football program. But I think maybe you've got the right idea already. A lot of people benefit from the current system. Maybe it's time we move on. Okay, so now the bad news, at least the bad news for the college football player. And the bad news begins with the fact that these highly recruited premier athletes have most likely been sold a bill of goods. And they've been sold that bill of goods by the coaching staffs, the fans, the university, and the NFL, and maybe even the NCAA. It all starts with the dream of going pro. That after just a few years of playing college football, they will move on to become highly compensated professional NFL football players. Statistics, however, clearly demonstrate that that's not true, at least for the vast majority of them. This is just a dream and not reality. When scholarship college football players in Division I and Division II schools are interviewed, 52% of them say they believe they will play in the NFL someday. Well, why do they believe that when the facts are clear that only a tiny percentage will ever get to play in the NFL? These impressionable young men continue to believe this dream because it is not in the best interest of those who profit from them playing for free under the current system to discourage them. The actual number of college football players that will ever take even one snap, even in practice in the NFL, is less than 1.6%. So the reality of the dream that they have, the 52% have, is far from true. Well, maybe it's time we move on and consider the academic and injury side of the bad news for the players. If we're going to talk about academics, then we need to start with the whole scholarship issue. Because for many fans, the university, the coaches, and even some players, they believe that the players are currently adequately compensated by receiving these scholarships. Let's take a look at that. First, we have to look at how many scholarships does each football team in Division I and Division II get to hand out? Well, each FBS school can offer up to 85 scholarships, while each FCS school can offer 63. But if you think these scholarships are adequate compensation for these student athletes, maybe you need to consider a few more things. First of all, are you aware that those scholarships are not guaranteed for 4 years? They are not 4-year scholarships. In fact, they are renewable at the end of each year and can be canceled at any time. So just because some of these players got a scholarship 1 year, it does not mean they get to keep that scholarship for the duration of a college degree program. And of course, one of the biggest reasons some of these scholarships get canceled is due to injuries. Now, on the subject of injuries, all scholarship football players are required to buy medical insurance to help offset the costs of any medical expenses. But I guess it won't be surprising to learn that not all the medical costs may be covered by the insurance. And not only that, but the colleges don't necessarily have to cover all the remaining medical costs. Let's investigate that issue a little bit further, the issue of injuries. In one recent study that was conducted over a 5-year period, looking at all injuries from all college football programs, they found more than 40,000 injuries reported. And although most of these were not debilitating, there were also tens of injuries that were catastrophic in nature. And around 10% of these injuries were concussions, which of course may have ramifications later on in life for these players. In yet another study of hundreds of college and pro players, and remember, virtually all pro players come out of the college ranks, more than 90% were diagnosed with chronic traumatic encephalitis, CTE. 90%. Think about that number. What a huge number. And who knows what the real costs of this kind of injury, CTE, is to those individuals, their loved ones, the insurance companies, and yes, maybe society at large. So at this point, do you still think that the scholarship is adequate compensation for the student athlete because it might result in a degree that that person might not otherwise have an opportunity to get? Well, if you do, you need to also ask yourself, what are the chances that a scholarship football player, college football player will actually graduate? Well, it turns out that scholarship football players are actually 18% less likely to graduate than all other males attending college. Now, one would wonder, why is that? And if by luck or perseverance, however, a college football player does manage to graduate, what most likely is his major, and what are his job prospects and earning power after graduation? Because certainly that's a way to evaluate the value of that scholarship. Now, you should understand that the top degree programs for obtaining the highest salaries after graduation, these are bachelor's degrees, go to architects, engineers, software developers, nurses, lawyers, and a fairly long list of other degree programs. But it should be no surprise that the top 3 majors by college football players are not among these. The top majors of college football players are communications, kinesiology, and physical education. So if you're one of the more than 98% of college football players that don't get a shot at the NFL, and yet still manage to graduate with a degree, you will likely find work as a PE teacher, fitness instructor, or high school or middle school coach. Now, these are all great and honorable professions, but the question becomes, with all the potential injuries and possible associated lifelong medical problems, such as CTE, were those years of playing college football worth it? I don't know. Only the players can answer that. But if we're going to talk about these degrees, then we need to look at something else. We need to look at the quality of the education and the degree, if they're lucky enough to receive it, by these college football players. How well equipped are these football players when they graduate, if they graduate from college? How well equipped are they to compete with other non-athletes who graduate from the same degree programs? Well, that brings up some interesting questions that most major college football programs don't really want to shine a light on. Some studies have determined that in major college football programs, the players are spending at least 30 to 40 hours a week in non-academics. That's practice, traveling, competition, and in some conferences, we can be talking as high as 50 hours a week. Now, if you're spending that number of hours in non-academics, surely that impacts the quality of study and learning during your 4-year degree program. Would you not agree? Well, let's do a comparison. We'll make somebody up. For comparison, let's consider an ordinary non-athlete pursuing a college degree while working 40 hours a week at a normal job. If that student is dedicated, they can probably handle 2 courses a semester, which might be 6 hours or 8 credit hours, depending on your school. But at that rate, it's certainly going to take a lot more than 4 years to graduate. So, if a college football player graduates in 4 years, obtains a degree in 4 years, it might make you question the quality of that degree and the learning associated with it. Maybe. I don't know. But recently, there have been some NFL players that have come out and confessed some things about their life in academics, or lack thereof, while they were playing football in college. In fact, some of these pro players have said that though they were deemed by the university scholastically eligible to play college football, which they did happily for their teams, when they left the colleges and went to the pros, they could hardly read or write. That doesn't say a lot of good things about the quality of learning, and maybe even the quality of the degrees college football players might obtain. Now, hopefully this is the exception and not the rule, but it does make one wonder about what the norm might be for these athletes who are spending 40 to 50 hours in non-academics each week of each year. All right. So if these scholarship student athletes have a lower graduation rate, have very little statistical chance of ever playing in the NFL, have to spend 40 to 50 hours per week in non-academics, are risking getting major life-altering injuries like CTE, and finally have the possibility each year of losing their scholarship before they can graduate, don't you think maybe we should compensate these gladiators with more than just the price of admission? Now, I'll be the first to tell you that I don't have any real idea how we should monetize this. The correct amount we might pay these players that would make sense. But I'm just going to throw out a wild number and you can come up with your own. But let's talk through the number I come up with. And I say we pay each one of these scholarship athletes $50,000 at the end of each scholastic year while they are still on scholarship. Now, with that sort of money, these young men could buy additional insurance. They could save to pay for college in case they lose their scholarship during the period that they're working on their degree. They could maybe buy a nice car, nice clothes, or whatever. It would be up to their discretion. But at $50,000 a year, you could still pay all of the scholarship FCS football players for about $3 million, which is less than the lowest paid top 25 football coach, the head coach, only the head coach, not the staff, the lowest paid coach in the top 25 programs. So I would submit that paying them $50,000 a year for each year they're on scholarship doesn't seem all that unreasonable when you compare them to what the coaches are making, the coaching staff is making, what the universities are making, because they're making more than $100 million a year. And I especially think this true when you guess, or I can guess anyway, that some form of payment is probably happening under the table right now, out of the light of day, for a lot of these top-notch college recruits. Anyway, that's my case for saying why we ought to pay these college athletes at least something above and beyond the scholarship. Please hit the red subscribe button below and that little gray bell. And go to my website and check out my other rants. www.lennydoesrants.com. This is Lenny, and I'm out of here.